We're back on the Zero Hour. I'm your host, Richard RJ Eskow. You know, my next guest, Marianne Williamson, is a political activist. She's a best-selling author, non-denominational spiritual lecturer. She's been on the New York Times bestseller list. She's run for president before and is again. Her career began in the 1980s, during which time she became involved with HIV and AIDS activism. She has in total written 15 books, of which 7 are New York Times bestsellers, and 4 of them hit #1. She's now running for the Democratic nomination for president again, against incumbent President Joe Biden and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And with that as an introduction, Marianne Williamson, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Thank you for having me.
So let's start with this before we get into the issues, which I definitely want to discuss with you in some depth. The reason why I want to start with what I'm about to start with is that it seems evident to some of us that there's no real appetite in the leadership of the Democratic Party for having a discussion of the issues in the primaries. And the position that I most often hear is that the existential threat to democracy posed by presumably Donald Trump as the Republican nominee again means that in effect, that kind of debate or the conversation is a luxury we can't afford. Clearly, you feel differently, and I'm wondering if you have any new thoughts about that, given your experience of the last few weeks.
The narrative that you just articulated is riddled with delusion and denial. It's riddled with a failure to recognize the significance of this president's lack of popularity, his low numbers in the polls, 67% of Americans wanting to see someone else, his inability to really take a big lead against a man who was twice impeached and multiple times indicted. The people who say the PR narrative that you just said feel that we will be able, as Democrats who simply white knuckle our way back into the White House in 2024. And it's sad, actually, to hear how many Democrats are foregoing critical thought, are foregoing free thinking. The DNC says we should go this way, as though the DNC, they got this. If they got this, Donald Trump would never have gotten to the White House the first time. And secondly, we are thinking that if somehow we suppress democracy, that's going to be the way that we save democracy. Now, I'm not running and thereby representing a threat to the ability to defeat the fascists. I'm running as a way to defeat the fascists because I agree with Franklin Roosevelt, who said that we wouldn't have to worry about a fascist takeover as long as democracy delivered on its blessings. The fascists should never have gotten so close to the door. And they did, because for decades now, under Democratic presidents as well as Republicans, we have failed to provide for the majority of American people what should be considered the promises of democracy, those which are afforded to the citizens of every other advanced democracy: universal health care, tuition-free college and tech school, paid family leave, a guaranteed living wage, a real middle class. Over the last few decades, under Democratic Republicans as well as Democratic presidents as well as Republican presidents, we have moved in the direction of this trickle-down theft from the public sector, from what used to be considered the common good, from what used to be a thriving middle class. That is our danger. And so the danger in 2024 is not people voting for Trump. We don't need to have one more conversation about who he is. Man hears what he wants to hear, disregards the rest. Those who love him, going to love him no matter what we say. They're going to vote for him even if he's in prison. The electoral damage, risk and peril for the Democrats in 2024 is people staying home. people, particularly young people, for whom, to be honest, their material circumstances haven't been any better under Biden than they were under Trump, who do not have any kind of nostalgia as the rest of us do not have the larger institutional memory that the rest of us do, have no appetite for voting for someone who, the Willow Project has given more oil drilling permits than Trump did, has not removed their college loan debt, and truly, after yesterday, has only continued the building of the border wall.
Well, for what it's worth, Marianne, I totally agree that turnout is the critical issue here. Enthusiasm is the critical issue here. And it seems to me, one of the things that's puzzled me about this election cycle is you and I were both involved in the Bernie campaign. You as a surrogate, me as a writer, and the same people who were, I think rightly, very rightly, objecting then to the idea that the primary process should be foreclosed and the nomination should be considered a done deal, in that case on Hillary's behalf, are now many of, if not most of them, doing the same thing. They're basically saying we don't want a challenge to Biden, and bear in mind, these are the people I'm thinking of are people who said, even if Hillary becomes the nominee, a vigorous debate on the issues will strengthen her for the nomination, will force her to become more adept at give and take, will perhaps move her to the left in a way that will make her more viable in the general. But the very same people who made those arguments in 2016 preemptively, it seems to me, have endorsed Biden for re-election and taken the same position that the Hillary people were taking in 2015, 2016, which is there should be no challenge because the threat is too great. Does that seem right to you?
It's mystifying. It's painful. To be honest, it seems to be about me. There's some irrational animus directed towards me. You have known me for a long time. Mm-hmm. You know who I am. The mischaracterizations, the mythology, the derision, the mockery, you know me. I am saying the things that the people that you're describing say they want to hear. My agenda is what they have been saying for years they want to see effectuated. For a lot of them, there's a genuine difference of opinion about Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Not that I don't agree with them about how we got here, but we end up disagreeing about really how we look at Vladimir Putin at this point. But I don't think that's what it is. They use that as an excuse. But there is some irrational animus, Richard. People who hear me, who will come to my talks, say, oh, that's who you are. But people who like to think of themselves as serious critical thinkers, not misogynists, not vulnerable to manufactured consent, or in this case, manufactured derision, who like to think that they don't base their opinions on anonymous quotes.
Right.
Or real evidence, just won't open. It feels like it's me.
Well, I wonder because, and by you, of course, that would mean whatever projection they have of you, whatever impression they have of you. But it strikes me, for example, that because of what I keep hearing, I know you keep hearing, is there's no serious challenge to Joe Biden, right? That's the language that's used by a lot of people, including a lot of progressives, and yet many of the same people considered, for example, Pete Buttigieg to be, quote unquote, serious when he has less experience, I personally have always thought he's an empty suit, but that's me. But the idea that a guy whose total political experience was winning not enough votes to fill a medium-sized college football stadium in order to become mayor of a small Midwestern city had more gravitas or something. It makes one wonder what's behind that, to what extent being a woman might be behind that, be part of that, to what extent people's discomfort with thinking about spirituality might be behind that. I do think there's an element of that. I hear, I'm not necessarily trying to pick a beef here, but for example, Cenk Uygur, who we both know well, I believe I heard him the other day say, well, there's been no serious challenge. The same thing. It's like, wait a minute, but Pete was a serious challenge. I could name others, of course, but John Delaney or whomever. But the point being that this is clearly part of the issue. But I do wonder, Marianne, about cause and effect here. In other words, to what extent this perception of inconsequential or not serious is the cause of this dismissal, or to what extent the desire to dismiss relies on that explanation, right? It's a chicken egg thing.
It's like people are in a trance. First of all, mine is the serious candidacy. I'm serious about the 1 in 4 people who live with medical debt. I'm serious about the 85 million underinsured and uninsured. I'm serious about the half of America's seniors living on less than $25,000 a year. I'm serious about our need to declare a climate emergency. I'm serious about the things that this president doesn't even touch. This president's agenda, tell me how serious this agenda is. Finish the job. That's a serious agenda. And I think that's true even about Bobby Kennedy. To be honest, there's a projection onto men that, man, they're serious, if a man says it. And people say that's not true, but I don't agree with that. Anyone who has known anything about my career, it's a very serious career. And they can make a joke like I'm a crystal lady, which I've never mentioned and never written about. What I have done with my life, a lot of these people who say that go to therapists who read my books, go to yoga class. It's like, another one I hear is, oh, she's amazing. I love Marianne. She's amazing, but she can't win.
Right. That old, what they said about Bernie, right?
And Bobby Kennedy, and I like Bobby as a person. This is not personal, but his people aren't saying, I like him, but he can't win. They're saying, I like him, and I'm sending a check.
Right.
I heard, what's her name, Emma Vigeland say, I like Marianne, okay? It's just, I think her campaign is overvalued.
Overvalued? I'm not sure exactly what that means. But
what does that even mean?
I would say with Bobby, I have no personal aversion to him either. I've encountered him and some of his, cadre or here and there, but I would say nothing for the two of you. For you to be the one who gets accused of being out there is a little odd, because Bobby has said some things that to me really are out there. For example, if he were correct that the virus had been genetically engineered to avoid Jews, I wouldn't have been so sick earlier this year. So right there, he's got a credibility problem with me, and not to mention the 5G or whatever it is. But you get this. Okay, we get it. You're up against this. Meanwhile, you're presenting serious policy proposals that I would love to see the Democrats talk about. You've introduced the Economic Bill of Rights, which we should talk about, which of course goes back to originally Franklin D. Roosevelt, a Democrat, and you recently talked at some length about health. So, along the spirit of changing the things we can and, accepting the things we can't, at least for the moment, if you're willing, let's transition to policy and talk about that a little bit.
First of all, I want to say this. Nothing less than that will defeat Trump or any other Republican. We will defeat the Republicans in 2024 by offering the American people so much more. If all we offer the American people is the idea that Bidenomics has been so good for them, that is contrary to the visceral experience of 80% of the American people. So the idea that that's a serious agenda with which to face the Republicans in 2024, that's the unserious. Those are the unserious people. And like I said, no, if we all just get together and we'll just kind of white knuckle it. If that's the case, if that's all you're doing, then even if you win in 2024, they'd be back in big time in 2028. The Democratic Party needs to look in the mirror. The Democratic Party needs to rebrand. The Democratic Party needs to transform. That's what has to happen. And like you said, what my agenda represents is a return to the Rooseveltian principles. Economic Bill of Rights, that came from Roosevelt. Department of Peace, Roosevelt said we need to do more than end war. We need to end the beginnings of all wars. The Department of Children and Youth, Roosevelt said that a necessitous man is not a free man. I want to end the drug war. I want to present to the American people as the candidate a genuinely inspiring, fundamental vision for economic reform and a new beginning and a season of repair in this country. That's exciting. That's not infrastructure bill got passed. Are you kidding? To a person who cannot afford their car payments or living in their car, they're supposed to be excited that infrastructure bill got passed. So who are living as 1/3 of American workers are on less than $15 an hour and cannot afford a place to live. We need to offer the American people real, genuine economic reform. We need to cut the cord with a 50-year chapter of trickle-down economics, which has decimated people's lives. People's lives are falling apart, Richard. And the Democratic Party elite are so emotionally buffered that this is going to be a return to 2016. This is not going to be 2020. It's going to be 2016. Two candidates said to the American people, your rage is legitimate because the system is rigged against you. Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. And the difference between them was that Bernie meant it. Now, Hillary's message was, let's continue the success of the last 8 years. And millions of people looked at her and went, are you kidding, lady? I'm drowning here. What's success? The rage that person felt, the frustration. In some ways, Richard, is even worse now. The depression, the anxiety, the despair, the suicide rate. People see no hope. And that's what the Democratic Party has got to present in 2024. Not love us because of Bidenomics. It has to be, we will give you something. We know we didn't last time, by the way. We didn't lead to a raising the $7.25 minimum wage, as we said we would, but we will this time. And we will give you Medicare for all, and we will give you tuition-free college, and we are going to find a way to cancel those college loan debts. And we are going to get paid family leave, and we are going to have free childcare, and we are going to have a guaranteed living wage and sick pay. And people will understand that no presidential candidate can say those things and then have a magic wand and they're going to automatically happen. But the party can stand for those things. A presidential candidate can mean it. A presidential candidate can use all the capital of the levers of the executive branch if you will give her the chance. And if, in my case, I face the obstruction to those things because of the dominance of the insurance companies, the pharmaceutical companies, big food, big ag, big chem, gun manufacturers, big oil, big banks, defense contractors. We all know who they are. I will get up there and I will say it. And I will lay it down as real as president as I lay it down as real as a candidate. And all those friends that you're talking about who say she's not serious have not come to one of my lectures. And you know what I'll say? I defy them. I defy them to come to one of my talks and leave that room saying she's not serious.
And Marianne, one of the things you talked about Hillary's campaign and the pain that people were feeling then, and quite rightly that her candidacy was, let's have basically another term of Obama because things are so great for you. We hear now the Democrats saying, well, this economic indicator, that economic indicator has improved somewhat, which I always liken to, you use the word drowning, I always liken it to if you're 6 feet underwater and someone says, hey, good news, now you're only 3 feet underwater, you're still drowning. The indicators mean nothing to you because it's a life and death matter. But I would add to that, and I'm be interested to know what your thoughts are on this. One thing that I think, you mentioned that you think the trauma, depression, and so on is even worse now. I would think that one of the reasons for that is that we've all collectively been through the agony of the pandemic, of the shutdowns. I mean, this to me was traumatic. It was not to me personally, but I mean socially traumatic, isolating, and now it feels as if we have a collective amnesia about the fact what it should have done was, to me, was shown an X-ray on the flaws in our healthcare system that allowed more than 1 million Americans to die. And it seems now as if both parties have engaged in collective amnesia about it. And so we're not talking about healthcare anymore. I mean, the drug stuff is fine, but even for Medicare recipients, I pay $20,000, $30,000 a year for medications on Medicare because I have a chronic illness. Fine, it'll get better in in a year from now, maybe if it doesn't get reversed, but nobody's talking about the crisis that everybody's facing on a daily basis from health alone. And I know you had post-national trauma, and I know you had some recent statements about health, and I'm wondering where, first of all, about that, and also about where you think maybe this collective trauma, if you agree with that interpretation, fits into that.
Well, I would love to talk about it. The one thing I'd like to suggest as a change in your narrative is when you said nobody's talking about it. I am.
Of course. Yeah,
and
sure.
My healthcare plan is called the Whole Health Plan. I hope people will look at it, Richard, because we need to do more than treat the sickness. We need to proactively create a healthier society. In terms of the $23,000 that you spend, this is very typical in America. We have 18 million Americans who cannot afford to pay the prescriptions that their doctors give them. And we have 85 million who are underinsured or uninsured. So this issue of underinsurance is very big. Like you said, you have the insurance. There are millions of people who can afford to go to the doctor on their insurance. What they can't, what the insurance does not provide is pay for the medicine, pay for the treatment, pay for the testing, pay for the operation. I've had doctors say, I don't even know why I bother to practice medicine. So our healthcare system is in shambles. We spend the most money of anyone in the world, anyone in advanced democracies, and we have the least excellent results. So we need clearly a Medicare for all situation. And the fact that, once again, you have someone making this very clear in her platform at a time when 68,000 Americans are dying every year from lack of health care. 1 in 4 Americans having medical debt, $88 billion in total, when if you put the top 5 pharmaceutical companies together, their profit last year alone was $80 billion. What is the serious agenda here? And the people who will not support that are the ones lacking in seriousness. How are you going to push the president left? By endorsing him. And you see a lot of this. You see someone like an AOC, who I respect in many ways, but she's out there tweeting about how we needed to declare a climate emergency. Well, then why did you endorse him? And why did you endorse him saying, oh, well, given the alternative? In terms of healthcare, how we can just give into this. We are acquiescing to this. The president has said that he would veto a Medicare for all bill. So if he has said it about the first 4 years, it's true of the next 4 years. And of course, that should include transformative elements, such as the opportunity in every time somebody goes to a doctor, it should be mandated that the doctor, no matter what pharmaceutical might be prescribed, that the doctor show them on a computer what for the same disease or the same, sickness, what are the non-pharmaceutical options that are also recommended, particularly given the fact that so many people cannot afford to pay for the pharmaceutical options. We have 1.3 million people in this country who ration their insulin. You don't see this in any other advanced democracy. You had people living in their cars who had to choose between the insulin and the rent.
Right.
And they said, well, at least if I have the insulin, even if I'm living with my kids in a car, they'll still have a parent.
Right.
This is how dire it is out there. And the Democratic Party should be speaking to this despair. Not, when the Democratic, every time somebody says to me, don't you realize the fascists are at the door and that's what we should be focusing on right now? You know what I say to that every time? Let me guess. I bet you have health care.
Right.
Let me guess. I bet you can afford to send your kids to college. Let me guess. I bet you can live on just one job and that it pays more than $15 an hour.
Right.
So my whole health care plan, what's transformative about it is that it does not just address the issue of Medicare for all. It also addresses many ways, starting at the beginning of one's life, that we can help to foster proactively a greater cultivation of a healthy society. Look at the carcinogens in our food. Look at the bottle of ketchup in the United States compared to a bottle of ketchup in Canada. Look how many companies that are American companies who will sell the same product in Europe that they do here, but the ingredients are so different because the carcinogens that are in the food here, which gives the food a greater shelf life, which means the company makes more money, they are not allowed to do because those carcinogens are outlawed in Europe, in countries where their agencies have not been captured by corporate interests, and they actually do serve the people rather than the bottom line corporate profits of their donors. That's how corrupt our system is. And yes, it is very serious to mention this.
Right. It strikes me, by the way, on that front that I read recently that one of the obstacles to a U.S. United Kingdom trade agreement is that they don't want our beef because it's so filled with chemicals that aren't allowed, even in United Kingdom that's been primarily governed by conservatives for the last 15 years. Even they know you can't eat that stuff.
Well, of course, their conservatives are more like our moderate Democrats.
Right.
Also,
right.
What they went through with mad cow disease, et cetera, they're very careful about their beef.
Yeah, so absolutely. And I know you're supporting, your platform includes living wage. What is a living wage to you?
Well, a living wage, it's so interesting because there's been all this conversation about a living wage, raising it to 15. In most major American cities, an actual living wage is over $20. And you have a third of America's workforce living on less than 15. So, when the Democrats or the Republicans, for that matter, go around and bragging about low unemployment, there's no conversation about what those jobs pay and how many of those jobs are jobs that a person could live with dignity on just one. So when you were talking about the data, yeah, if you watch the mainstream news, and it's a political media industrial complex, Richard, they're all working together. This, just like Fox supports Republicans, MSNBC and CNN do the bidding of this unbelievably suppressive DNC. And that should have everyone outraged. How are you going to solve how, like you said, they were outraged when they did it to Bernie, but it's almost like to me, yeah, I don't, take me out of it. Take me out of it. It's almost like, okay, you don't like me. I get that, but take me out of it. It's wrong. It's undemocratic and it's not going to work. But that we went there. What was the thing we were just talking about that sort of got me there?
The food we were talking about, and living wage.
Oh,
and
something about living wage. I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought there.
That's okay. Before I let you go.
Oh, I know. Hold on one second.
Okay, go ahead.
It's how the same people, that won't let me on. It's just unbelievable how CNN won't let me on and MSNBC won't let me on, even though my poll numbers are higher than the vast majority of the people who were on that Republican debate stage the other night. Those serious candidates who therefore are in all the Sunday news shows and all those programs, regularly. And of course, the goal here is don't let her on, and then her poll numbers will go down because she won't be exposed. Her funding will go down because she won't be exposed to people. And I'm not going to pretend that they're not correct, but I am saying that's really undemocratic, what we're talking about. Those are also the programs that have the pundits, the economists come on and say the economy is really doing good. Who's it doing good for? Their crowd. They're 20% of the elite. These people, Richard, have no idea how close the crowd is to the gates of the Bastille. There's going to be something big in this country. This is unsustainable, what's happening. There are too many stress points on people's bodies, stress points on people's minds and hearts, stress points on the economy, stress points on the planet itself, on the ecosystem. So there is such rumbling, and it's going to break in one way or the other. One way is in the direction of greater democracy and justice. And that would be a revolution at the ballot box. Not, well, she's not serious, or what else do we have? A revolution at the ballot box in support of someone saying these things. I just happen to be the only one running for Democratic nomination who is. And if we do not have that, if we do not lead this country into an era of return to the basic principles of the Declaration of Independence, then it's going to break the other way, in a direction of dystopia, in a direction of chaos, in the direction of neo-authoritarianism, in the direction of neo-fascism. This is so serious. That's the thing. That is serious.
Right. And Marianne Williamson, I want to take your time seriously too. So with that in mind, as always, wonderful to talk to you. As always, best of luck. Stay out there. We'll be watching. And you have an open invitation to join us anytime. Thank you, Richard. Thank you. I so appreciate your friendship and your support and who you are and your very serious voice. Thank you. And we'll be right back after this on the very serious 0 hour. That's why we call it the 0 hour. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and we'll be right back.